Today I've brought you to Rudyard Lakes in Staffordshire. This place is one of my favourite venues to fish in the whole country, and I'm going to run through some of my top bite-sized feeder tips when you're fishing for bream and skimmers. Kicking off your session when you're fishing for bream on a feeder, I think it's really important that you put some bait in at the start. You've got to be positive. It's a massive open wild venue, the fish could be anywhere, so you've got to put some bait in to attract them and keep them in your peg. My best piece of advice when it comes to actually feeding bait at the start is don't put too many particles in your peg. Bream can be a nightmare to catch at times. You get loads of liners and indications because they're eating loads of loose feed, but they're ignoring your hook bait. Keep it to mainly ground bait. So a little bit of an example, on today's session I've used 10 of the largest exchangers. That's what I fed at the start, but I've only put a little pinch of loose feed in each feeder. So either micro pellets, a little pinch of casters, an odd pinch of worms. Keeping that loose feed down to a minimum will help focus the attention on your hook bait, and trust me, they'll become a lot easier to catch. I keep my hook bait options really simple when I'm targeting bream and skimmers. I only use 3 hook baits. I always start a session on maggots. Dead maggots are a great way to see what's happening in your peg, because if you get an odd nuisance fish, an odd small fish, a little rattle, it gives me a good indication to try my next hook baits, which are worms. I always try and fish worms if possible. They're a lot more positive, and I think bream and skimmers absolutely love them. Red worms tipped with a red maggot is a killer hook bait. 2 or 3 red worms with that maggot stops the worms crawling over the point of the hook and potentially bumping fish. My final hook bait is a full dendrobina. That's a really positive hook bait, and if the fish are really having it, I will not hesitate to put that one on. My next tip is quite a controversial one, but it's definitely worked for me over the past couple of years on venues just like this. It's actually moving my feeder, and I'll just demonstrate to you now. All I do is I've cast my feeder out, everything's landed on the bottom, my hook length's landed, and after about 2 minutes of the feeder actually sitting there, what I like to do is just pick up my rod and move my feeder along the bottom. Only around that much, 50 centimetres is about perfect in my opinion, because I'm fishing with an 80 centimetre hook length. So what I'm doing is I'm straightening out all that hook length. I think it's really important for bite detection. You see indications on your tip a lot quicker and a lot easier because there's less line between your hook bait and your feeder, so everything's straightened out. A bit like you're fishing on a pole, you wouldn't ever fish 80 centimetres of a hook length on the bottom. I'm trying to straighten everything out, and I think you see bites a lot easier. I haven't had a fish for a couple of casts now, and my next tip is all about creating an attraction and drawing fish down to where your hook bait is. I'm getting an odd indication, an odd liner, so I know fish are in the area, but I think they sit off bottom. And what I'm going to do now is I'm going to fish a sloppy window. And all I'm going to do, swap my cage feeder, which I'm currently fishing, swap it over to a little window there. I've got the medium with a 40 gram weight on, clip him on, and all I've done is I've got some of my ground bait and I've wetted it up, so it's almost like a paste, it's like a slop. And when that goes into the water, it creates a nice stream of bait. It's almost like a cloud, and I think, well, I hope the bream follow it down to the bottom. It's definitely worked for me. Just venues just like this, Rudyard, Staunton Harold, anywhere that you're fishing for big bream, they definitely love that little bit of cloud. So I'm going to slop him up, get him out there, and hopefully get stuck into some more bream. You don't need anything too complicated when it comes to your actual hardware when you're fishing for bream on venues like this. I like to keep my rod choice simple. I've got a 12-foot N-gauge power feeder. I can fish anything from, say, 35 metres out up to 70 metres, which I have today. That's been my longer line at 70 metres, which might seem quite far, but I think it's important that you've got a rod that can do multiple uses. And this is matched to an Aventus 4000 reel loaded with 08 pulsate braid. This reel and braid combo is perfect for longer distances. That thin braid will get you out there nice and comfortably, and the 4000 reel matched to this 12-foot rod is perfect. But I'm not fishing that braid direct to my feeder. I've got a 12-pound Shield shock leader. That acts as a bit of an absorber. I can whack those feeders out and I'm not going to crack off. Down to the terminal side of my setup, I'm using a helicopter rig. It's a really simple rig, and in my opinion it's the best when you're fishing for bream on these sort of venues because it's virtually tangle proof and you know you're fishing every single cast. And to tie that rig, all I've done is I've slid on 2 small super tight line stops with a medium heli swivel in the middle. That's what I attach my hook length to, and I've got a 6-inch twizzled loop drop there. And you might think that's quite a long drop in terms of a helicopter rig, but in my opinion the bites are magnified significantly. You get a lot better bites, they drag it off the rest. I used to use sort of 2 inches and I used to get a lot of little taps and rattles, but now it's literally pulls your rod round. I think they're just a little bit of less tension between your tip and your hook bait. I think it's really nice little tip that. Finishing off my rig, I've got a link swivel there which I attach my feeder to. That's just sitting in the bottom of that 6-inch twizzled loop. And down to the hook length, something that I do a little bit different to others is I've got a 30 centimetre piece of 12-pound Shield attached to that heli swivel, and that's got a little loop in the end which I attach my hook length to, which I'm actually fishing with. I think that acts as a little bit of a kicker. It's a bit more durable and I get less tangles. And today's session I've got a 50 centimetre piece of 017 N-gauge down to a 12 feeder special. It's actually a ready rig which I've cut down to 50 centimetres. That's a great starting point when you're fishing for bream. Don't go too short straight away. They're quite crafty fish at times, and that 80 centimetres is about right. Sometimes even go up to a metre, but start at 80 and see how your session goes. That's hardware setup, dead simple, but really effective when you're fishing for brasms on this sort of place. Something that can be quite confusing is what tip you actually use in your rod. Personally, I try and use the lightest tip I can possibly get away with, simply because the bites are better and you can read what's going on in your peg in terms of liners and indications much easier. Today, for example, I'm using a 1.5 ounce tip in this 12-foot N-gauge power feeder, and I'm fishing at around 70 metres. It's absolutely perfect. I've had a few small fish problems and odd little rattle this past couple of chucks, and I feel like there's an odd small fish in my peg right now and I need to do something to draw those bream and skimmers back in. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to have a couple of quick chucks with a feeder full of micro pellets. Micros are a brilliant way of holding bream in your peg and drawing them in. They've got a lot of power, and hopefully that'll get rid of those small fish problems, get those bream back munching on the bottom.